What's up, everybody? One topic that's come up a lot lately, and is a big topic in internet circles, is freedom of speech, what it means, how it applies to the internet, First Amendment, etc. All that good stuff. And I've enjoyed hearing the disagreement, hearing opinions that are counter to mine, but kind of come to the conclusion that people, free speech absolutists as it relates to the internet in general, are either bad actors who are upset that they can't say the fucked up things that they want to say on the internet, or they're not welcome, or suffer some type of repercussion from what they say, or people that don't have a full understanding of the ramifications of what they say. We think about the internet, we want to be able to say whatever we want, but we don't necessarily think about the ramifications of what if people really could post anything they want and you couldn't remove anything. I think people generally have an agreement, like anything illegal or promoting violence, even if it's not illegal, because some promotion of violence actually, in fact, isn't illegal. It would have to cross the line of an imminent threat as laid out in the Brandenburg case. That's kind of the, forget the word, but the precedent, that's the legal precedent that is basically currently exists. But people generally agree with that. But some people actually think you should have to get a court order to remove something from the internet. Like, basically there should be some due process to decide if something is breaking a law before it can be removed. And then I bet there's some people who even think that if something is illegal, it still shouldn't be removed because, prosecute the person. What does it matter if some threat is up or something like that? But that would be prohibitively expensive to have to go through the court system doing police what's on the internet. That would be pretty crazy. So these people apply the concept of freedom of speech as an absolute right. That's the moral, that is the one moral principle that should dominate everything else. You should be able to say whatever you want, anywhere you say it. Not only that, there's people that say there can't be negative consequences to what they say. This is something I remember Mike Enoch saying. He says the government should protect him from the ramifications of what he says, because if there's negative ramifications from what you say, you don't really have freedom of speech, because that can be used to prevent you from having freedom of speech. All kind of stretch interpretations of what the First Amendment actually means in principle, and it's really for the purpose of enabling political speech without the government punishing you for it. You know what I mean? Like saying, I don't like President Biden. Like what you can't say in Russia without being punished by the government, by Putin, right? Like, the leader's a bad leader, he sucks, I want a new leader. Or I want to change the government systems or enact this amendment or that. I mean, that's really the purpose, but it does protect other forms of speech as well. It's kind of like the police, right? Like, everyone talks about how much they hate the police. The police should just let you do whatever you want, and they don't think about the ramifications of if the police weren't there, or if they didn't enforce the law, what society would actually look like. Similarly, if we allowed anyone to say anything on the internet, I was asked this question: what should be banned from the internet that's not illegal? One thing I didn't think of is spamming, right? Like, if you just... spamming is totally legal. You're just saying, whatever, buy this product, or, like, invest in timeshares. but it totally ruins the interaction that you would have online, because it's just a bunch of fucking mumbo jumbo spam. Platforms limit that. They're perfectly allowed to. But I don't see anyone complaining about that, because nobody's like, oh, I want to spam. But still, that's speech that you're not allowed to say online. I see a lot of people who say, like, you should be able to express your hatred online, or even further than hatred, or extreme mockery, or whatever. What else? So, yeah, it's like these people that don't feel like they have a safe space to do that want to propose that you should be able to say anything online. Otherwise, there's a risk that they won't be able to say such things. I think these platforms are really ugly places if they couldn't police it. And don't think of the negative ramifications if it wasn't policed or there wasn't something enforced. Like the same thing with the police. And people are either, like, some of them are bad actors, some of them are weighing have certain priorities that kind of makes them biased to having people say whatever they want. Like, they run debate shows, they want to be able to talk about whatever it is they want to talk about, and obviously you're limited in your debates and what you can talk about if you do run a debate type show or a talk show. So this is a definite negative if you have one of those shows. Obviously it's not as much fun. So people who have this type of belief system, like BPF, like the guy who runs the Crucible, some of the debaters on that show, like the synth guy, they propose that you should be able to say, I guess they would, anything that's not illegal, I guess is their line. Because the way to arrive at truth is to hash those ideas out, right? Like the best debaters, if somebody is saying something toxic, you just point out how it's toxic and argue against it. And this is how truth is arrived at. And ultimately everybody will see this truth. And that's the greatest social good. That's their argument. And I tried to point out that this is stupid, because although in principle this could arrive at the absolute truth, is kind of a fun, clean process to arrive at truth. In practice, it doesn't work, right? Because people post ridiculous conspiracies like Pizzagate. They insulate themselves from objective reality. People still believe this Pizzagate stuff, no matter how much it's debunked. It results in extreme outrage, and while this is an example of where violence wasn't proposed, it outraged people to such a degree because they were alleged to be using violence against kids or something in a basement. It resulted in a guy grabbing a machine gun and going into this pizza place and shooting. So if we didn't have the ability to police, censor, whatever you want to call it, the internet, well, you wouldn't be able to stop movements like this. What about slander and libel? These are not necessarily crimes, but they're torts, they're violations that you can be held accountable for. So why should they be allowed online? If you can be punished and have to pay something, what's worse, having a comment deleted or being taken to court and sued for something? So if you can be sued for speech and forced to pay your hard-earned money, how can you say you can't have comments deleted or you can't be deplatformed? for saying such slander or libel. And again, it would be prohibitively expensive to make you go through the courts to establish what's slander or libel. So the only way to make that work is to have the platforms decide. And I hear this argument of like, well, who gets to decide what stays up and what stays down, basically implying, somebody with a bias, somebody is going to have ulterior motives for deciding what stays up and what comes down. That goes with anything. I mean, the platform decides, the people that run a platform, which is influenced by the users, which is influenced by society at large, they decide. I mean, just like we decide anything, we decide what the laws are through the democratic process, basically. We decide what's uncouth to say in public, what's couth, and so if there was no enforcement of anything, society would be a pretty horrible, chaotic place. Comments that result in real damage, you would have no way of stopping them because people just don't trust of a way to police such comments. But some of the examples I brought up, you would have medical misinformation. You would have no mechanism to delete medical misinformation. I use the Tide Pod example, which we laugh at that, but people fucking died from Tide Pods. They were dying from Tide Pods. You wouldn't be able to take that shit down. And then there's this argument of like, well, who decides what the truth is? Well, we have mechanisms for doing that. Society at large, experts, institutions. Like, who can say that cyanide is poisonous and that you shouldn't take it as a medical treatment? I mean, like, people that say such things, they might have a bias, and like, how can we really trust them or really establish that cyanide is poisonous? I mean, maybe I think it's not poisonous, right? So why can't I say it's a good treatment for COVID? You know what I mean? Like, no website or nobody can establish if it's poisonous or not. I mean, if I should be able to say that it's healthy for you. So like, these are the type of stupid arguments that exist. But you almost, if we were to go by these people, you can never establish what's true versus not true. There's no objective truth or no objective reality, and kind of everything goes. The toxic along with the non-toxic or healthy. What else did I want to say about this? So yeah, there is a risk of over-policing of speech. Speech that should be allowed, that's not allowed or deplatformed. But how do we enforce that? I mean, I think there's a market mechanism. If Twitter throws too many people off, well, they're going to go to Gab or something like that. And yeah, so there's this argument like, National Socialists aren't allowed to openly operate on Twitter. So should we let them operate openly? Should we let everybody operate openly? Or if something isn't allowed on Twitter, it's not like a permanent thing, right? Like, if you think something should be allowed, but it's not, and you're in favor of free speech, maybe you should make an argument as to why it shouldn't be banned and why it should be allowed. That to me makes more sense than allowing everything, including toxic, potentially dangerous movements and ideas. You're still allowed to advocate for yourself. You're just not allowed to advocate on certain platforms, or maybe you're shunned by society or hated. So make the case why you shouldn't be hated, instead of demanding an absolute right to speak everywhere and post everywhere and things of this nature. You still have a right to speech. You just might not have that right on certain platforms or areas. This is what BPF said. What if Israel supporters get banned? Well, They are banned from certain places in certain countries. You make the argument as to why they shouldn't be banned, why such a move is ridiculous, hateful, unhealthy, whatever. And like if National Socialists want to go on Twitter with a swastika or something like this, they can write to Twitter and say, this is why I think we should be allowed on. They can advocate. They can make an account where they're not actually sharing that. They're just arguing why it should be allowed. Because imagine a society where you couldn't exclude anybody. In the First Amendment, you have the right to protection from the government for speech. You also have freedom of association, which includes freedom to disassociate. So you have the freedom to not associate with certain people or ideas. So the free speech absolutists, they're emphasizing one part of the First Amendment, but not the other part. Freedom of assembly, which includes freedom to exclude certain people, whether that be in groups, on platforms. They're just misapplying what the First Amendment really is because they don't like how others are using the First Amendment to exclude them. So I think they need to keep that in mind. And I think this idea of allowing the most toxic movements the freedom to go anywhere they want because the best ideas will come out on top. I think people really want to believe this, that this is the best way, this is the absolute truth, because this is the world as they wish it existed. But allowing people to say that Sandy Hook was fake, that the parents faked it, or other events are fake, or medical misinformation, you're just going to increase the likelihood that people engage in toxic behavior. So I definitely don't think that's for the greater social good. I think the mechanism of including certain people and excluding others, that's the healthy mechanism that makes it work. You know, we exclude certain ideas and movements and accept others, and that's how we ultimately create the most healthy society. Yeah, the downside is certain people get excluded, but you need that. You know, what else? I don't know. I've said all the thoughts I have on my head right now, but everyone have a good day.